Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is Minette Michelle Davis Jackson, also known as Kaya Eve, the mother of all living resurrected. As I mentioned before, I am Sarah resurrected, I am King David resurrected, and I'm also Odessa, who is Esther resurrected. And we're going to cover the story of Esther today because Thanksgiving, the pagan holiday that Esau, the tribe of Dan, the scribes and Pharisees created to destroy Judah and Israel, versus Purim for Judah and Israel to protect themselves from a letter that Hamen, who was an Agathite, who was a Hagar's descendant. So we're going to cover only chapters 7 and 9 of Esther, and I will attach the video of Esther, Odessa, that I had posted on YouTube 2 years ago so that you can hear the story of why Thanksgiving, the white man created Thanksgiving, versus Purim, who Odessa, who was Esther, created. Mighty God Ahaya allowed for that feast day to be created as a memorial of being saved from Haman's letter to destroy the Jews. And this is also a parable from Hitler destroying all the Jews. I know many of the people, the pictures of Hitler destroying Jews, we were really black people and Latinos. A lot of the images the white man had changed to white people to deceive Judah and Israel. So let's get into the topic called Thanksgiving Holiday versus Purim Feast Day. Thanksgiving holiday, Esau the Whiteman Holiday to destroy Judah and Israel, versus Purim Feast Day, Judah and Israel Day to defend themselves, protect themselves against the enemy's lies. And this is the story of Esther, Odessa, in the King James Version Bible. The wicked Hamen Hargar's descendants. The so-called Thanksgiving Day has been celebrated and taught to school children as the origin story of what would later become the United States. But many Native Americans, Indian who were Judah, says Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the slaughter of millions of indigenous people, Indians, who were Judah and Israel, and the theft of their lands by outsiders. The United American Indians of New England declared Thanksgiving a national day of mourning 50 years ago, a jubilee ago. In 1970, the descendants of the pilgrims wanted to hold a banquet to celebrate the anniversary of the Mayflower landing in Plymouth. So we're going to cover Esther 7 and Esther 9 of the King James Version Bible to align you biblically of what happened and why Thanksgiving was created and why Purim was created to counter-strike the enemy lies. So Esther of the King James Version Bible, chapter 7. So the king, who was Ahasuerus, who was Idris Elba, and Haman came to banquet with Esther, the queen. And the king said again to Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, "What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom." Then Esther the queen answered and said, "If I have found favor in thy sight, O King Ahasuerus, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we have been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage." Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther, the queen, "Who is he, and where is he that does presume in his heart to do so?" And Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king Ahasuerus. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the unto the place of the banquet of wine. And Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold, also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Esther chapter 9 of the King James Version Bible. Now in the 12th month, this is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews, who was Judah, hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews, who were Judah, gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. For mighty God Ahijah, I am that I am, are inside and with Judah and Israel. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies and officers of the king Ahasuerus helped the Jews, who was Judah and Israel, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews, who was Judah, smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews, who was Judah, slew and destroyed 500 men. And Porshantama, Porshantata, and Daphan, and Aspatha, and Puratha, and Adalia, and Arithatha, and Pormashata, and Arisaiah, and Aridia, and Vegesta. Then 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamethiah, excuse me for the names, guys, Hamethatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they. But on the spoil laid they not their hand. On the day the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king Ahasuerus. And the king said unto Esther the queen, The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee on what is thy request further, and it shall be done. Then said Esther, If it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews, who is Judah and Israel, which are in Shushan, to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done, and the decree was given to Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes who were enemies 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were Judah and Israel that were at Shushan assembled themselves together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same day rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews who was Judah and Israel that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews who were Judah undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device which he had devised against the Jews should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they call these days Purim, Purim, after the name of Pur, Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews who are Judah ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim, Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews who was Judah and Israel, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed from themselves and for their seed the matters of the fasting and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. So I briefly wanted to go over the difference between Thanksgiving, the enemy holiday, versus Mighty God Ahia feast day that he allowed Esther and Mordecai to be written and followed every year for Judah and Israel. And I have attached the link to, again, the story of Esther that I had recorded 2 years ago for you to listen to the entire story, Judah and Israel, and to stop following the enemy's holidays. And thank you for listening. Shalom.